There's a lot of situations where you might want to use this next trick, but one in particular is when you want it to make it look like there's holes in the model, but you don't actually want to cut parts away from it. In this video, we'll look at a way to make parts of an object transparent, and you'll still be able to sculpt and edit the model as if nothing has changed. It might make more sense to just show you, so let's take a look. There is one quick thing to note before I get started with this video. All the previous videos of this course were made with the previous version of ZBrush 4R7. However, starting with this video, we've upgraded to ZBrush 4R8. There are a few minor differences, but I recommend you upgrade because it's free to do so anyway. Okay, continuing on with this tip. Now we've got this model of Athena here, and let's say we want to make her clothing kind of tattered and torn and ripped with some holes and tattered edges. So let's see how we might do this. I'm going to zoom in here on the bottom of the dress. And let's say we want to put some tatters in here. I'm going to go into my subtools and let's make sure we've got the dress subtool active. If I hit wireframe with Shift F, you can see we've got topology already. And we could just come in here and start deleting polygons, but there's a couple problems with that. One is that we would lose all of our higher subdivision levels. Another problem is that we would lose this nice, neat topology. And that would make it more difficult to make changes to this dress later on. So the trick we're going to do involves creating texture maps. So we need UVs laid out on our model. So make sure you're in the lowest subdivision level on this, hitting Shift D to go down if you need to. And let's go up to Z plugin, UV master, and just do a plain old unwrap. The default settings work pretty good for this. And in just a few seconds, it should finish doing the unwrap operation. Okay, now that that's done, let's go ahead and go up in our highest subdivision level. I'm going to turn off wireframe with Shift F and just hit D a few times until I get to the maximum resolution for this model. Now what we want to do is paint on where the holes should be. And I'm going to paint with black. So for this, let's get the paintbrush. B, P, A is the hotkey for that. Okay, let's zoom in and start painting where we want these holes to be. I'm going to get a smaller draw size, just holding down spacebar. Let's bring this size down a bit. And we'll just test out what it's like to paint. Okay, we've actually still got white turned on, so we can hit V to swap the black and white colors. Let's try that again. Okay, looks pretty good. We're painting this on. Something else I want to do, I want a harder edge on this brush. It's kind of a soft fall off, but the holes should have a hard edge. So let's change the focal shift, just holding down spacebar to get this pop-up. And I want to bring that focal shift to -100. That's going to give the brush a really hard edge. Okay, great. So you can just come in here and just keep it really loose and organic. Just create something that looks like a ragged edge. Some parts are going to be torn more than others. Just rotate this view around a little bit, just trying to keep it really natural. Maybe some places will be torn and other places won't be. And maybe we'll put a little hole up here. Just want to do something nice and fast. Doesn't have to be perfect, just for demonstration purposes. Okay. Actually, I just want to get that one last little spot there. Don't want a floating piece. Now to make this transparent, we have to convert it to a texture. We need to have UVs laid out for the texture map to work. So let's open up texture map. And under create, we want to create a new texture map from Polypaint. Okay, so you can see here now it created a texture map that's exactly the same as the poly painting that we did. Now there's this one slider right here called transparent. What this does is it takes any colors that are black and makes them transparent. Now, when this is set to 0, it means that there's not going to be any pixels transparent. If I set this to 1, only absolute black will be transparent. So if I zoom in here, you can see that some of these pixels are actually very close to black, but not quite black. So what I want to do is just crank this all the way up to maximum so we get the full range of those colors turning transparent. Okay, so you can see now we've got some holes in our model. You might want to come down to display properties and turn on double if it's not on already so that we can see the holes through the backside. Otherwise, it'll just be transparent from the backside, and you might want to have that turned on. Okay, great. So the real advantage of this is that we can make edits to this at any time. So we can edit the shape of the holes and increase or decrease the amount that's torn away. And we can also edit the fabric underneath, change its shape in any way, in a way that's much more straightforward than if we had actually cut out those polygons in those areas. So let me show you how I would do that. Okay, so first I'm going to edit the holes. So let's go back up to texture map and we can just turn off texture temporarily. So now we're back to the poly paint that we had. And so with this, we can just keep painting more black areas, or we could hold down Alt and paint white, which is actually just going to remove that black paint. Set it up any way we want. Let's say we want a nice big long tear that comes up here. Okay, great. So now all we have to do to see that transparent again is make a new texture map, new from Poly Paint, and then crank up transparent again. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Now let's try editing the model underneath the tears and rips. So what we can do is leave texture on, but I'm going to turn it off just to make it easier to see the model without those holes there. And we can also go to Poly Paint and turn off Colorize, just temporarily hide that. And with Colorize turned off, actually the entire model is going to take the color of the dominant color here in our palette. So I'm just going to hit V on the keyboard to swap those so we have white so we can see that more easily now. And so we can just do any sculpting that we would do on this normally. So I'm going to get my inflate brush out, B-I-N. I'm going to get a bigger draw size and just sculpt some different patterns here. Maybe I'll have to smooth that out a little bit. Okay, now that I've sculpted that a little bit differently, we can go back to texture map and turn texture back on, and you can see that those holes are right where they should be, and it was really easy to edit the mesh underneath these holes because we didn't actually have to destroy any of the topology to create the holes. And of course, we still have all our subdivision levels. If I hit Shift D a few times, you can see we can go down to a lower subdivision level, but still have that nice high detailed hole. So I use this trick very often when I want to sort of experiment with the shape that holes should take on an object before I really want to commit myself to cutting those holes out. Because sometimes eventually you do have to actually cut these holes out. So for example, if you want to make a 3D print of this, we actually have to give thickness to the cloth, and that means cutting out these holes. So let me show you really quick how I would do that. So let's hit D a few times to go up in our subdivision levels. And I'm going to turn off texture. And let's go to Poly Paint. We could actually leave this off right now because it'll be easier to see what I'm about to do next. We can go into masking, and we can mask by color and mask by intensity. Now we have a mask that's the same as that Poly Paint was. So to actually cut out these holes, what we can do now is go down to visibility rather. And we can hide PT, that's hide by unmasked. So now everything that was masked is visible, everything else is hidden. And now we can invert that visibility by holding down Control, Shift, click and dragging in an open area. And now we can delete what's hidden by going to Geometry, Modify Topology, and Del Hidden. Oh, there's one thing, it's telling us we can't delete this when there's subdivision levels in the model. So I'm going to delete lower subdivision levels and now delete hidden. Okay, so now these holes are locked into the model, but I don't want to do this until I'm really happy with where those holes are and I'm done making modifications to the shape of the clothing and to the shape of the holes. Okay, so there's lots of ways that you can use this tip. One way I like to use it is when I want to put holes on an object without creating a lot of detail in the mesh. Let's say I have a really low resolution mesh, but I want really intricate holes. I can just find a texture map that has the shape of those intricate holes, map it onto the model with the UV map, and then simply crank up transparency and those holes will be apparent.